Hello everybody, today I want to show you how to run through the Druid 016 single machine Quickstart. So right here I have the docs pulled up for Druid Quickstart. I'm going to follow these docs along and we'll discuss how to start Druid and how to run some queries and to load some example data to play around with. So let's see. First of all, you'll need a Linux or Mac OS machine. I'm going to be doing this on a Mac OS computer, and I'm just going to use the single server configuration. So first things first, you have to download Druid. You can do it from the Apache download page right here. I've already downloaded Druid, so we don't need to wait for this. After you download Druid, we need to extract it, and we need to cd into that directory. Here's a nice handy script. I'm going to copy that and just paste it into my terminal, and I'm inside of the Druid directory. Inside there's a number of really cool directories. There's a set of useful scripts that we'll be using, and also a bunch of configurations made specifically for this quick start. You can see more details about what each of these directories is right here. The one important thing you have to note is that right now for the 016 Druid, you actually have to download and install Zookeeper as part of the quick start. So I'm going to copy this script right here and paste it. This will download Zookeeper, extract it, and also move it into a directory called ZK, which is where the startup scripts expect to find it. Now that I have my Zookeeper downloaded, I can start all the Druid services. To do that, all I have to do is run the bin start micro quick start. If you look real quick at the bin directory, you'll see that it has a large number of useful scripts for doing all sorts of things, including starting services in different configurations. For this one, we're going to just be using the micro quick start, but in other tutorials, you might learn how to run a clustered server and you'd be using different scripts. I'm going to copy this one here and run it. What this will do is it will actually run, this one command will start a number of services. In this case, it's starting all the services on my machine, and it's going to be monitoring them and making sure that if one of them dies, it will restart it for any reason. This is very handy, and you can also run it as a daemon. So next up, everything I need to do on the command line for this tutorial is done. The next step is I'm actually going to move to the Druid console, which is located on localhost 8888. So I'm opening it right here, and this is really the first step into Druid. Here you can see that I have Druid running version 016. I have a number of extensions loaded, and I can basically get an overview of my cluster. Let's keep reading the docs. So to load the data, we're going to just load a sample data file that actually ships with Druid. It's a day of Wikipedia data, and it has some nice columns for us to play with. The data is located right there, and I'm going to scroll down here. I'm actually going to follow the loading a data file tutorial. So this tutorial walks you through how to load it in the console, and I will show you how to do this in this video. This tutorial assumes that I've just started the micro quick start command. So I'm going to go in my Druid, and I'm going to click on this load data. And I'm going to select a local disk, because this file already exists on my local disk because it was part of the Druid distribution. Next, I'm going to copy paste these values over, because the base directory is quick start tutorial, and I'm going to grab this file specifically from that directory. I'm going to preview this, and I see that the data in that file is sampled and returned for me. This does look exactly like the data I'm expecting. This is every row in this data set is an edit of Wikipedia, and this data is represented in the JSON format. I'm going to click Next. And in this step, I'm going to parse the data. So Druid will actually determine the parser to use. Druid will automatically guess JSON because this data looks like JSON. This is a great parser to use. I could futz around with this, but I'm not going to for this tutorial, but you're definitely welcome to try it on your own time. A key concept in Druid is having a time column. It's very important for Druid to be able to shard your data according to some primary time column. It's okay to not have a time column. You can use a constant value. But if you do have one, it's very helpful to indicate and parse it correctly. And this is what this step is all about. As you can see, I have a column called time, and Druid automatically determined that that should be used and that the ISO format is applicable. That's great because I don't have to do anything else. I'm going to go to the transform step. Transforming the data at ingest time and filtering it is beyond the scope of this tutorial, so I'm going to skip these steps and go straight to the schema step. In the schema step, I can configure how this data will be ingested. By default, Druid wants to apply rollup, which is a very powerful operation that can greatly increase the speed of your cluster and reduce the size of your data. It's very powerful, and I recommend you read about it. But for this tutorial, I'm going to turn it off because I'm really just trying to ingest it in the simplest way possible. This is a quick start after all. So here I have all of my columns, and with rollup turned off, Druid detects certain columns as strings and certain columns as numerics. It does it by itself, but if I disagree with something, I could adjust it from this menu right here. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to make sure that the partitioning of the data is accurate. Now, there's really no way you can go wrong here because this is such a small data set. By default, it will want to partition the data by day, and that's totally fine. This is just going to create one segment for me. Next, tuning the data. I really don't have to mess about with this. I can really just accept all the default values. It's very handy to, if you want to understand what some of these things mean, to be able to click on these information icons here to see the inline documentation for each one of these properties. I'm going to skip past the tuning step without making any changes. And finally, in the publish step, I'm going to select the name of this data source. It automatically guessed the name from the file name, but I'm going to change it to something simpler. Just WikiTicker is fine. Lastly, I'm going to review the spec that Druid made. I could have made this spec by hand, but it was so much easier to do it with this point-and-click data loader. I'm going to submit it, and this will submit the task that will be actually used by Druid to ingest this data. Druid, unlike other databases, has pool-based ingestion, which means that instead of saying insert, insert, insert one statement at a time, pushing data into Druid, you give it tasks to pull data out of Druid, loading it from a file, from Kafka, or from whatever have you. So here I have my task running, and I'm just going to wait for it to finish. While I'm doing that, I could look at its status and look at the logs for that task and see a real-time view of the logs. Like actually here, I see that the logs have already finished, so I think this task is completed. If I close this and refresh, I see that this task is successful. I can go to the data sources view, and I can see that I have one data source fully ingested. That was pretty easy. I really didn't have to do much. I can see all sorts of details about this data source right here. Next up, let's query the data to see what this data is all about. Starting from this wrench icon, I can select Query with SQL. I could have also gone to the query view directly, and it will populate a nice select star from WikiTicker here. And querying this, I see a lot of interesting data about Wikipedia. On the side here, I have all the columns, and I can pretty easily take a certain column and expand it. For example, I can look at all the different channels. Now in this case, it won't give me any data back because by default, it apply the time filter to this data. That's a very Druid thing to do. But I can click on time and click remove filter to remove it. And now I have my top channels in this data source by count. Maybe I can add an aggregate. And there I have another aggregate. I can really type whatever SQL I want into here. So I could add page to also select a group by on page. If you're unfamiliar with Druid SQL and you want to know what functions are available, I advise you make use of the documentation that's auto-suggested when you start typing. So that is it. Now I can start playing around with this. Maybe I could ingest this data with some different parameters, or maybe I can try out some example data sets. A lot of fun to be had here. Thank you for watching.